This one is the one
Hi,
I want.
everyone. Welcome to Writers Chat. We're so glad to have you with us, whether you're here in person or you're watching the replay. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm here with my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh and Brandy Bro, and our special guest, who will be introduced in a moment. I do want you all to know that because we're talking about fight scenes today, I decided to wear what I call a hand me up instead of a hand me down because my grandson gave it to me and it's an Avengers hoodie. So I'm the fighter in chief today, even though I'm not the one presenting the program. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to have a really great time with this. My light just flashed on and off. Uh, who is introducing Crystal this morning? Melissa, thank you. I'm turning it over to Melissa.
Hey everyone, welcome back today. We're glad to have you here. I'm sorry, I was a little unprepared and I didn't have my
No,
bio
you're
for
good.
Crystal popped up, but I'm on top of it now. But a lot of you are familiar with Crystal. She's a returning guest, been with us several times, and just presents some awesome workshops that we so enjoy being a part of. Just a wealth of information that Crystal has to share each time, and so we're really looking forward to having her here to share in this hands-on workshop today with fight scenes. But before we jump into that, for those who may not be familiar with Crystal, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Crystal Caudill is the award-winning author of Dangerously Good Historical Romance. She is a stay-at-home mom and caregiver. When not writing, Crystal can be found hanging with her family, drinking hot tea, or reading at her home outside Cincinnati, Ohio. And you can find out more about her at crystalcaudill.com. Isn't there like a giveaway or something special going on with your books right now?
Yeah. So, not Counterfeit Love. We Three Kings was a novella collection I was a part of, and our book made it to the Forward Indies Award finalists. And so, Kara Putnam, Angela Roostrong, and I are doing a giveaway of three people can win a print copy of the book. So if you go to Crystal Caudill author on Facebook.com, you'll see the posts and all that. So
Awesome.
lots of fun. And
Oh
it
yeah,
goes until the end of the month, so you have plenty of time. So,
congratulations. I will make
yeah,
sure to share that link in our live chat too so that others can see it.
perfect. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to recap real quick, or as quick as possible, about fight scenes. So for those of you who were not here, there's a couple purposes to every fight scene. We're trying to get through. So there are two purposes of a fight scene. You want to move your plot forward and to reveal the character of your protagonist, your antagonist, and any observers. So when it comes to moving your plot forward, you're talking about each character has a goal in the fight scene, and it's like a mini goal compared to the overarching goal. So this particular fight is either going to move them closer to or farther from that overarching goal that they have. And it's going to affect the rest of the story. If you write a fight scene and it doesn't affect the rest of the story, then you don't need that fight scene, or you need to rewrite it so that it does. And it's going to create or eliminate obstacles for your characters. So as far as revealing your character, throwing your character into a volatile or violent situation reveals who they are at their core. So their instinctual reactions, their values, their flaws, their skills, and what type of fighter they are. So think of honorable versus a trickster, aggressive or passive aggressive, an amateur fighter versus a professional fighter, physical fighter, intellectual fighter. Are they going to use fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? And many people were not familiar with fawn. So most people know with fight, you're going to fight. Flight, you're running away, you're fleeing the situation. Freeze, you just freeze up, don't do anything. But fawn is when you try to calm the situation and make the aggressor less upset. You're just trying to play the peacemaker in this situation. You're trying to make the problem go away through being submissive, basically. And so these are the four possible character reactions that you want to consider when you're writing fight scenes. So we talked about a couple different examples, how different fight scenes reveal different things about characters. And then, of course, you have verbal and physical fights. And most of the things we talk about with physical fights also apply to verbal fights, but verbal fights also have some special things to take into consideration. You still want to move your plot forward. You still want to reveal things about the character, but the volume of dialogue does not have to be yelling for it to be a fight. You can send barbs at each other. There's things you cannot say that make a fight worse, like, don't you love me? And if there's no response, that's going to increase the battle and the fight going on. Your focus is going to be more on what is said, not said, your body language, the actions and emotions of the characters, and the pacing tends to be slower than physical fights. One thing we didn't have time to talk about is communication and conflict styles. So I'm going to slow it down just a little bit for this section. There are three main types of communication. You have your passive, your aggressive, and your assertive. And actually, I need to pull my notes up because I didn't prepare to share that. How do I see my notes again? Slide. Anybody know where I say show note presenter notes? Oh,
I'm sorry that I do not know. It's not under view.
it was not. You would think it would be.
I know.
Go to, I bet. Nope. Formats?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. View. Ah, there it is. It is presenter notes. Okay, so passive, because I want to make sure I get this right. It's been a while since I've talked about it. The passive communicator will prioritize the needs, wants, and feelings of others, even at their own expense. So these are the people who are going to sacrifice themselves to keep things at peace. These are the people who fawn. They don't express their own needs. They don't stand up for themselves. They usually are soft-spoken, make poor eye contact, are often looking down or away, and they have a lack of confidence. Then you have your aggressive communicators who only express their wants, needs, and feelings. They tend to bully or ignore the needs of others. These communicators are easily frustrated. They speak loud. They're unwilling to compromise. They often use criticism, humiliation, and domination, frequently interrupt and do not listen, and they're generally disrespectful. And then assertive communicators is kind of that happy place where we all need to strive to be. They are the people who will emphasize the importance of both people's needs. They stand up for their own wants, needs, and feelings while listening and respecting the needs of the other person. They will listen without interruption. They clearly state what they want or need. They'll compromise, have confident tone, body language, and good eye contact. So you need to decide what kind of communicator your characters are going to be in a fight, and how will those people interact in a fight. If you have two very aggressive communicators, there's going to be a lot of shouting over the top of each other and just a lot of escalating of the situation. If you have an aggressive with a passive, you're going to have the person who is the passive communicator kind of shrink into themselves and try to appease their assertive communicator rather than confront them. So think about how those three different styles would interact. There are 4 different types of conflict styles. Avoidance, so those are the people who minimize the conflict and they fawn. Your volatile conflicts, which are love, passionate debates and disagreements. Validating, they seek to understand and appreciate each other's beliefs. Hostile, they have feelings of contempt, and the 4 horsemen are likely used. We briefly touched on the 4 horsemen last time we were together, and these are called maladaptive communication styles. And if these are present in a relationship, it's usually the beginnings of the relationship breaking down and disintegrating into nothing. So you have your criticisms. They often offer offensive statements and direct verbal attacks. So we call these you statements in counseling, like you did this, you just sit around all day while I'm at work. They jab directly at the person they're talking to. Then you have the defensive communication style, where their self-protective response to criticism. They're usually phrased as a counterattack. I wouldn't have forgotten to take the food in if you had cleaned out the fridge like I asked you to. So they shift the blame. So they use that mix of I and you. Then you have contempt, which is deliberately causing emotional pain to someone else. Generally, it's rooted in feelings of disgust or disrespect for the other person. Think of your passive aggressive statements. That dress would look great on Julia Roberts, but you're no Julia Roberts. Those sort of ouch statements. Look how happy he is now that he's with her, talking to the ex-girlfriend. Those sorts of things. And then you have stonewalling, which is when someone is unresponsive and withdraws from the conversation rather than engaging. So these are your silent treatments, or you're just walking away. And these are not the healthy step-aways. There are times when you are in a fight or a heated discussion with somebody and you have to communicate, listen, I still want to talk about this, but I need to step away for a minute and collect myself before we go any farther. That is healthy. This is not the healthy kind of stonewalling. This is the just walk out the door and slam it, say nothing. Those are the things that you do not want to do. And they're usually manipulative and hurtful decisions. So they're purposeful steps to hurt the other person. So that is basically the ground foundation we need for talking about fight scenes and working with fight scenes. We'll get into the nitty-gritty. I'll be able to cover some of that when we talk about the other things. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I do not want to leave the meeting. All right, so
Please do not leave the meeting.
no, that would be bad. All right, so now we're back and you guys can pull up your screens. So I hope you came with either a fight scene already written or an idea for one, because what we're going to do is we're going to do some brainstorming if you haven't. And if you do have one that is already written, you're going to be able to take the fight scene you wrote and check it against the other things that we're talking about. So first question, does anyone not have any clue or idea of a fight scene that they need to include in their story? I only see, and you guys can turn your cameras back on and turn your mics on and talk. This is going to be as much interaction as I can possibly make it.
I don't have one right now because I haven't gotten to that point in the story, but I'm collecting thoughts and ideas. It's middle grade, and it's people against these weird creature things, because I write fantasy.
So are they going to physically battle these creature things?
I don't know.
You don't know. Very nice. So give us a little bit about the story.
Okay, because I'm not even halfway through. So there are these creature things that steal souls, but they've been trapped under the Stone Kings, and the kings are crumbling and they're getting out. And so
they're true bad guys.
Yeah, they're really, yeah, totally.
So eventually your characters are going to have to confront these bad guys and overcome them.
Yes.
So you will have a fight scene. It will be your climax, probably.
Right.
So
yeah, but I
you
don't
don't
know
have to have
like
all it's okay. You don't have to have all the details or know how it's going to happen. We're going to walk through some of this. But if you keep it in mind that it's going to, in your instance, it's going to be a hero against a villain, climactic scene.
Yeah.
That should help. Anyone else need help kind of getting their grounding for what fight scene they're going to be thinking on?
I'll give you a situation that,
Okay.
and I'm trying to remember it because it's not the book I'm working on now. It's I'm working on next, and I have a NaNoWriMo draft I'll be working off of. And I think there was a physical punch in this. It's it's early on in the story. It's not the inciting incident, but it is sort of in response to the inciting incident, we'll say. So you have these are Germans who fled to Argentina after World War II. So they live in a very close community because they all have these secrets they're trying to hide from the world and their existence, where they are from the world, because they're all wanted. And one of them is a very distinguished, he comes from Prussian nobility, so he's very distinguished and chafes against it. And the other was more of the brutal kind of, the stereotype we think of, but, the more that kind. And the one man's son steals a painting that he knows was looted, and he's planning to return it. So those two men, after the son has disappeared with the painting, get into a physical altercation. But of course, the one guy didn't throw the first punch. It was the brutish guy that did. Though maybe it'd be more interesting if it was the other way around.
That is a possibility. Another thing you want to consider is they're not going to immediately walk up to each other and go into fisticuffs.
No.
So you're going to actually combine your verbal fighting with the physical fighting.
Right.
So you'll want to lead into it, which I love the verbal fights, because then you get to put all the jabs in and
yeah.
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 So
and there would
maybe
be jealousy
think about that.
there, and like the brutish guy would be, I'm sorry, I will turn that light off as soon as I get a chance, because it's just
You're fine.
great. The brutish guy would be jealous of the more distinguished guy who actually ended up leaving Argentina with money. He was able to bring money, and the other guy probably wasn't. So, there's different levels of things going on there.
And one of the things you might want to consider as you're writing, especially the verbal part, because once you get to the physical part, you won't be able to reveal it, but you can begin to show that jealousy to the reader, even if it's not like the full revelation of that jealousy. So think about, how does jealousy come through in a person?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. I love this sort of thing. So
That's fun. Where will
any
you
other
in summer when I need help?
Well, I'm only an email away.
Okay.
So anyone else need help kind of getting their head in the game before we dive into actually working with? I want everyone to work on their own story idea, because I think that's the most helpful thing. And you can ask questions particular to your need.
Well, let me ask you, I have this possibly as the inciting incident, but I have a protagonist who is a young boy, teenager. And I mean, his arc really is about trying to find a father type figure, but he is in a closed environment here. They've had to run away from remains of war. But anyway, the man who becomes kind of leader of the group of refugees, so to speak, is a narcissist and very manipulative. This boy at this point is buying into it and just thinks that he needs to be like this man. But then he is sent out on a hunt. He brings back a prize animal, and this leader steals it from him, says, no, it's mine. So they have, I don't know yet if it's going to be a physical altercation, but I mean, what are the underplay of that kind of thing with a narcissist and an innocent teenager?
Well, I think the thing that's really going to come through in that particular interaction is this is going to be a huge moment. I would even say it'd probably fall closer to the man in the middle, man in the mirror moment, towards the middle of your book, depending, and it could even be towards the inciting incident, depending where you have it happen in the story. But this is where the kid is going to realize that this is not the hero that he wants to be. This is not the person. He's going to start to realize that he doesn't want to be like that. So there's going to be this friction, because a narcissist wants everyone to love them. And so when this kid starts pushing up against him and saying no, and I don't think we should do this, and things like that, that's going to create a lot of friction. And it's probably going to start out very verbal versus physical, but you may reach a point of physical. For you, it sounds like the arc of his story is probably going to be breaking away from that narcissist and becoming his own person. Am I inferring correctly?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's exactly.
So throughout your story, the way I see it in my head, but how you do it would be how you do it. It doesn't have to be this way. I want to clarify that. Is I would start with a lot of, so start with like a minor verbal altercation, and then just make each altercation with this person more and more butting heads, more and more volatile, without going to the fisticuffs until you start getting closer to the end. At the end, you may need to go into a physical fight. It depends on how you write your story. But I would say most of your fights initially are going to be verbal. And you might have him starting. So we talked about the different styles of communication and the different styles of instinctual response. So he might start out as a fawner, trying to appease the guy, make him happy, and then slowly realize that this isn't what he needs to do. And so he might passive aggressively start doing things to stand out on his own, and then work his way up into assertive. Or he may go into aggressive, realize that's not the kind of person he wants to be, and then learn to become an assertive person. So just because you have a character start with one, doesn't mean that's how they have to react throughout the entire book. They can grow and change. So I would pick whichever place you want to be in the story for that's sticking in your head the most right now, as which fight you want to kind of brainstorm, if it's just a minor one or if it's the big one or somewhere in between. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Does that
Yeah,
help?
I think so. Yes, it does help. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else need some brainstorming help before we dive in?
I have a question.
Cool. I'm the awkward
So
teacher skill. I'll keep it quiet until everyone gets their chance.
I have a fight scene that's kind of like a brawl.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many characters kind of involved in this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little challenging to do without, to kind of see everything that's happening, but without getting lost and having too many things make the reader confused. So what is your recommendation for trying to show the big picture, but not in a confusing way?
So you're going to view this fight through one person's perspective at a
Right.
time.
Right.
And I would not shift up perspectives a whole lot. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't actually shift at all.
Okay, that's perfect. So you have to think about what are the most important things for them to see for the reader. And if they're going to see those things, what consequences are going to occur because they see what's going on? So if you want them to see his buddy get stabbed, he needs to see it. You need to have him look away. Maybe his opponent's on the ground and he thinks he's safe for the moment, and so he turns his attention. Well, his attention is away, the bad guy's going to have an opportunity to get up and get a punch in or whatever. So it's going to be kind of this back and forth of, oh, I see this, and then there's a consequence or things like that. And sometimes the only way to show what really was going on around them that they couldn't see is in the aftermath. So as they're stepping back to see and process what all's gone over, you can kind of help them see things then, but you're only going to see like the aftermath of it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yep. I think that's a great way to do it when we need to get a big picture kind of thing. One thing I did do is at the start of something, I had the whole room just kind of turn the attention to the center point of the start of the whole chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I
All right,
love
thanks.
and hate about movies is you can see everything at once, but
Yeah.
sometimes they move those cameras around so much that I'm just like, I have to close my eyes because it's just too much. So even movies can be guilty of it.
So when you do aftermath stuff, it doesn't always have to be a big, like big scene like what Brandy has. You
Right.
can still show some things aftermath even with a smaller
Mm-hmm.
group. Okay.
So this is something I need to add, I guess, to my presentations that I never really thought of. Every fight scene is going to have an aftermath scene. Your aftermath is their processing. And actually, I need to write that down so I know to go back and add that to my presentations. See, you guys even help me learn and improve. We're all in this together. You can't just jump from a fight scene into the next thing without having some sort of moment to process. Your readers need it, your characters need it, and it helps actually propel your story along because there's going to be repercussions to that fight that they have to make decisions about. You generally don't have a fight and then there's no decision to make afterwards. Generally, you have to decide, well, I knocked this person out. Do I call the police? Do I run away? What are the things I need to do? So you need to consider the aftermath in whatever decisions. Or if it's a verbal fight and the person walks out the door, do you go after them? Do you give them space? Has the world ended now that this relationship is over? However dramatic you want to be. But they need to have that moment, and your readers need to have that moment to process. So now I have to go back and add that, and I'm excited. Okay. Any other ideas, thoughts before we get hands-on?
I think we're safe to go into it.
Perfect. I know how it can be to not want to talk. All right, so everyone has their fight scene in mind. First, I need you to answer, and you can write it down, you can verbally answer, you can do whatever you want. What type of fight is this going to need to be? Is it going to need to be a verbal fight, or is it going to need to be a physical fight, or is it going to need to be a combination of both? Because it is possible to have both in one fight scene. The next thing you need to consider is what is the goal of each participant in the fight? So every character has that big overarching goal. This fight has to be a step either towards or away from that goal. But their goal is always to get closer. So they think this fight, whether it ends up being the step forward that they want it to be, they think this fight will get them closer to their goal. And sometimes fights are just literal responses to, hey, somebody's attacking me, I need to protect myself. And so the way that would connect to the overarching goal is I've got to live to meet this goal. So it just depends. So what is each character's goal? And that means your protagonist, your antagonist, and any observers. Because fights can have observers and observers can have an impact on those fights. So give me a thumbs up when you've either got that written down or kind of figured out, because that one takes a little more thought.
It's interesting that I have the goals of each because it's small. There's
Mhm.
two humans, one fairy, and then these
Mhm.
creatures. And they all have their goals. I know what they are. I just don't know what the fight looks like. So
And that's okay, it'll get there. Now I have a different twist on that question. What is your goal for this fight? How do you want this fight to affect your characters and the plot of your story? And then what is at stake for each of these characters? Because knowing what's at stake will determine how hard they're going to fight. We go till 12, right? I'm just trying to keep an eye on my time. Perfect. I'm just sitting here, so I'm trying not to move too fast. So just give me a thumbs up when you think you're ready for us to move on. All right. So connected to what's at stake is it's going to affect your tone. So each fight has a different tone, whether it's a fight for your life, which means I'm going to mess up that saying, so I'm not going to say the saying, something bars held or something. I mess up sayings all the time. No bars
Just
hold.
make up your own, you're good.
Something like that.
Bars hold.
No bars hold. There we go. So could be one of those types fights. It could be a Three Stooges fight. I love slapstick comedy. So you need to think about what is the tone of your fight going to be.
I told you backwards. No holds barred.
Oh, there we go. See, I'm not the only one who messed it up.
I know, we know exactly what you meant.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I thought I had it wrong.
Yeah, no, I was just backwards in my brain. I'm like, oh, dyslexia going on there, because it's literally saying what it is. No holds barred. It's dirty
No
fighting.
holds barred. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be something I would Google and pray I find the right answer. So, knowing the stakes and the tone of your fight is going to help you determine what their fighting style is going to be. And if you're a verbal fight, knowing their fighting style, how they deal with conflict is going in their communication style is going to determine that tone a little bit too. So let's see. The next thing you need to know is what do you want to reveal about the plot or characters to the reader through this fight? So once you have all these kind of elements together, we can get into actually writing it. So you can bullet it. What's the most important thing that your reader needs to learn about the plot or the characters through this fight? Yay! I love it when you get to discover that what you're doing has that you've done your scene well. It sounds complicated, but it can be as complicated as you want to make it. I'll leave it like that. But I think if you can think through these steps, if you're struggling, it just helps it all to flow better.
One thing I found in writing my fight scene was that if I started to get confused, then my reader's going to be confused. So wherever I was getting confused, I needed to pare away and just kind of focus.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Definitely, if you're confused, your readers will be confused. And there are times that you're not confused and your readers will still be confused. So it's it's a good thing to always have somebody else look at your fight scene with fresh eyes and say, hey, is there any part that you're just kind of lost or it doesn't feel like this is realistic? Whatever. All right, so there's a couple more things I want us to jot down, and I actually might share this screen so that the questions are all in front of you. But these are like detail oriented, specific to your fight that you want to think through. So like with physical fights, What things will the characters notice? What things will have consequences if they notice it? What weapons will they use? What fighting style words can you use to help us visualize that scene, but aren't too complex? So if you're using a specific martial arts, you want to make sure you're using lingo that the reader will understand, but sounds like that particular fighting style. And what injuries will they sustain through this fight? Rarely does anyone go into a fight without there being an injury. And I honestly would say no one ever goes into a fight without there being an injury. Even in a verbal fight, you're going to have those emotional wounds that get poked at you. So with verbal fights, excuse me, what is their communication style? How do they react to conflict? Is the fight about the real problem? So how many times have we had a fight with somebody, but it wasn't actually about what we were fighting about? So there was a recent situation between some loved ones who one person wanted to put a flagpole in the front yard and the other person didn't. And so they fought over that. But the words that came out were, I never get what I want. And the other person was telling me they always get what they want. And so it wasn't actually about the flagpole. So think about, is your fight really about that thing they're fighting over, or is it pointing towards something else? Yes, subtext is exactly that. Throw in some aliens and it's all more challenge. Perfect. Wonderful. What can be revealed through body language, actions, and what is said or not said? And that can even be in your physical fights too, because you want to have dialogue in your physical fights, if at all possible. It helps break things up. You can get some jabs in, you can reveal things about the characters and about the plot. The example we used when I was doing the fight scene lesson was the fight between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, when Darth Vader cut off his hand as Luke, I am your father. So there was dialogue in that fight, and that just completely changed the whole world of the character. So use dialogue powerfully in your fights. Do your characters use any of the 4 horsemen? How will the end of this fight affect their relationships? So I'm going to share this, and I want you guys to brainstorm for just a couple minutes or reread your fight scene that you already have written and see, do you answer all these questions? So I'm going to share that. Let's see.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for just a few moments. We'll pause
Yep,
it. We'll
that's
pause it
perfect.
and then just make sure we get it turned back on.
I will
When we
try
come back
to
together
remind
just
you.
to give you guys some time to do what you need to do.
Perfect.
Okay, well, maybe I am. Now I've lost the button.
So, and actually, oh, I can't, well, I'll use my watch as a timer. That's what watches are for anyways, right?
That's right.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get us going to the last section. And we're going to talk about a little bit about editing your scene. So usually you can't do this part until after you actually have the scene written. For those who already have it written, you could go ahead and check for these. If you haven't, these are some things you can think about and even keep in mind as you're writing it. When you're editing your fight scene, ask yourself these questions one at a time. Where can you add physical and emotional reactions? So where you have large sections of play-by-play, this is generally a good place to see if you can add in a physical reaction or an emotional reaction. Usually there's either some dialogue, some internal thought, or something that just not necessarily pulls you out of the story, but gives you that character's reaction to being punched or to having that barb just hit them in a vulnerable spot. So look for long sections of play-by-play and see where you can add in those reactions. Where can you add in the five senses naturally? You don't want to just say the air smelled like flowers and sunshine for no reason. There has to be a reason why they notice the smell. So there's lots of examples, but like the scent of gunpowder from a gun that was just shot, or the feel of the rough material scraping against his face, or gravel gritting into their face. If they're in a verbal fight, noticing things in the room, maybe something was thrown and broken, and so you can say that the vase shattered against this beautiful something or other, and the water ruined it. So maybe against a painting, and the water ruined the painting as well as the vase breaking. There's ways you can bring in the surroundings and the environment, but you need to find a way to do it naturally, not just say it smelled bad in there. Just random terrible examples as they come to my head. Where can you add dialogue or tweak it? And can you break dialogue up with action? So you can have a character start to say something, and then you say, he dodged the punch, and then they finish talking. So you have that action and the dialogue going on at the same time. That's a fun way to break things up. Dialogue is really important, no matter what kind of fight scene you're writing. Limit your internal dialogue. Verbal fights are going to have more room for this because they're going to have a little bit more of an emotional process to the fight going on. Physical fights, you tend to have the adrenaline going on so much, there's a lot less internal dialogue. Are there too many short sentences in a row? Short sentences will wear out your readers. I'm editing a story right now, excuse me, where I had to go to my friends to get an outside perspective because I had probably 7 or 8 sentences in a row that were very short. And I'm like, is this too much? Do I need to break this up? And they said, it's fine. It's right on that line of being too long. So I did some tweaking to it, trying to make it less short lines in a row. But you want to break it up so that you don't tire out your readers. Let's see. And you can add longer passages in between. Just don't do giant passages. When I say longer, I just mean like a couple sentences more. Did you start each character's actions on another line? This helps build in white space, and white space is your friend. It also helps your reader feel like they're progressing faster through the fight and through the pages, and that builds anxiousness and a sense of satisfaction as well. It's that whole psychology aspect of writing. Do you use passive voice anywhere? Fix it. You cannot use passive voice in a fight. She was slammed by the chair versus the chair slammed into her. You have a much different reaction mentally when you read those two sentences. You need the active sentence. And again, is there plenty of white space? So those are all things to keep in mind. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I hope you were able to screenshot anything you needed, and I can go back and pull scenes up again if you need to screenshot anything. But in our last couple minutes, are there questions about your stories, questions in general that I can help you with?
Just really want to write this scene now.
Yay! That was the
You know,
goal.
I'm not even halfway through this middle grade novel, but I'm like, okay.
And it helps sometimes to know where you're going. So
it's okay. I can, if I really am jazzed to do this, I should write it.
yeah,
then,
and you can always edit and change it if the story dictates you need to change it.
yeah. I probably knew that, but
Sometimes it just helps to have that.
to check and make sure it's all okay, right?
Somebody's knocking on the door. Hold on.
Well, this definitely excites me to dive into my scene too. I realize that I've got a lot of moving parts in mine because mine actually is taking place during a raid, and this is the Middle Ages in Ireland. So
Mhm.
these guys are coming in as a helping force to push out some raiders, and it's basically like
Groceries are being
if they can,
delivered.
you know,
Of course.
And so like, and so of course, like with any age group you're writing for, you have to keep your audience in mind and
Yeah.
all. And it's like, I struggle with how much detail and violence and all do I put in for middle graders, knowing that most of them get tons of it with their video games and things like that. And so I have to balance it, and that just comes from writing it, you know. So
I'd say that comes from editing it more so.
yeah,
Write down what you need to, and then you can always edit it back.
that's true.
That's kind of what I always lean in. It's like put as much detail as I can, kind of just the vomit on the page thing for the initial scene, and then go in and clean up and nitpick and say what needs to be there, what doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I usually write picture books, but you know, when you get an idea. So
Any other questions or helps?
so when you have, like in mine, these I just describe them as big beetle-like creatures. They're big, and they're the Vimgasium, and they have no dialogue. So there's would be more action on their part than my people, the fairy and the two characters who are coming up against this nonverbal thing. So I have to keep that in mind.
You do, but are you having all of them work together towards one
Yes.
background?
Well,
So
there,
then
and
there will be communication between each of them.
between each of them, I don't know how many of them Ghaziim are going to be actually in the mountain, inside the mountain when they get there. I could, haven't got there yet, but
Nice.
okay.
So you
Yeah,
can
it's like
still
it's really
integrate.
complicated, but usually I avoid fight scenes at all cost. Reading, writing, movies, all of that. I don't like any of it, but I know you need it sometimes, to keep action going. So this is really helpful.
And whenever you have a story where good overcomes evil
Mhm.
in such a direct way, you generally have to have that
Yeah.
fight.
Yep.
Anyone else? Johnny, if you're talking, you're on mute.
I was talking and you're right. I was on mute. We'll go ahead and wrap up, but stay for the after party. And if there are any more questions, you can ask Crystal that then. Next week, I believe we're having Naomi Mush on. Is she going to have someone with her, Melissa, or is it just her?
Yes, she is. I don't have that up with me right now too.
That's okay.
Pull it up.
Naomi writes historical fiction, and she and a few other writers are doing this collaborative project that I kind of just ran across and asked her to come then and share about how you do these books on a collaborative basis where you have these different authors writing, the different titles. And I believe what they're doing is starting out in like one era and then moving forward in decades. So it just sounded, and the covers were adorable. So we're really excited to have Naomi with us next week. And I will tell you, these collaborative kinds of things are indie authors and some traditional authors, they're kind of pulling together to do these projects because there's more interest. And if a reader reads one and they like it, they're likely to read all of them. So I just think it'll be great to hear how they got this off the ground and the steps they took to make it happen.
And the other author that'll be joining her is Amy Walsh.
Amy Walsh, yes. So very excited to have them with us next week to talk about that. Okay, so hope to see you then. If you are watching the replay, we do invite you to join us any Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, and around the clock, find your time zone. And we'd love to have you. We also invite you to join our Writers Chat Facebook group and to check out our Writers Chat Facebook page, where you can see all the episodes, as well as on our YouTube channel. Our playlist is with Serious Writer on their YouTube channel. So you can we've got a ton of episodes. You also will definitely want to go back if you have not seen it and watch Crystal's presentation on her episode on writing fight scenes. She showed a little bit of her slides today, but there was so much more, and it was absolutely fantastic. I never knew there was so much to know about fight scenes, and Crystal has just become, the expert on that part of craft. And it's wonderful because even if you're not having a physical fight, there should be arguments. You need conflict in your stories. So thanks everybody for being here. Stay for the after party, and otherwise we'll see everyone next week.